A properly done set of squats should hurt every single muscle in your body. The thing that it should not hurt is your knee joints. When we are squatting, the last thing we want to have to deal with is knee pain, but every so often, it winds up happening. And when it happens, the thing that we don't necessarily need to do is stop squatting. What we have to do is look at a couple of the situations that could lead to that knee pain and then address them. If we have pain in the joint, it's going to take away from our ability to really execute the lift. And it's going to take away from our ability to feel the mind-muscle connection that we want to get out of our squats, to really feel the muscles that we want working, and to really push our sets to fatigue. Because instead of our muscles being a limiting factor, pain in the joint is a limiting factor. So how do we get around that? We're going to look at 4 common issues that can lead to knee pain and exactly how to solve them. So as we look at these 4 issues, we're going to take a top-down approach. We're going to start at the hips and work our way down to look at the potential issues. And the first potential issue that could be causing you knee pain when you're squatting is improper hip loading. When we are squatting, yes, this is a knee-dominant move, which means we're going to get a lot of movement at the knee joint, but our hips are also involved in this, and we need to slightly hinge backwards. That way we load our glutes on every single squat rep. If we don't, then we're placing undue stress on the knee, and we're not really loading our lower body optimally so that we can drive the weight back up. Sometimes we kind of lose the ability to load our hips for whatever reason, and we just need to restore that and restore our timing, and that's where a move like the touchdown squat can be a really, really great fix. With the touchdown squat, you do not need a large platform. Even just one of these plates is a good starting point. I'm gonna use 2 because that's gonna give you a little bit of an idea of the visual of what's happening here. Normally when we squat, eventually what we want to happen is we want our knees to translate forward, but because we've got to really focus on loading the hip and we've got to understand how to load the hip, this is going to allow us to keep a little bit more of a perpendicular shin at the knee and really teach us how to load our hips when we squat. That's going to offload some stress off of our knees, and it's going to allow us to get back to squatting, and it's going to allow us to squat pain-free. With the touchdown squat, it's nice and simple. All you're gonna do, you're gonna stand on your platform, and my job is to sit back or sit however I need. That way I don't have any pain in my knee. And I'm thinking about just pushing my butt back, touching my other foot, the heel of my other foot to the ground, and then standing back up. You wanna do this as slowly as possible, thinking even 1, 2, 3 seconds down. Because what we're trying to do is work and pattern a really, really good eccentric. We're really trying to load that hip. What matters is the part where we're lowering down with control. We're trying to load that hip and then stand back up. If I'm doing that correctly, my torso is going to shift forward ever so slightly. That's ensuring that I'm loading that hip, I'm loading my glutes, and in doing that, I'm gonna take stress off of my knee. It's gonna help me rebalance my entire squat motion. What you wanna do, if you've been dealing with knee pain or if you're having knee pain, use this as a cueing mechanism before your sets of squats. So when you're warming up, think about doing 3 to 4 sets of 6 to 8 reps per side, just to get a really, really good feel for how to make sure that you're loading your hip, and so that you can find a really, really good angle for your knees to move when you're squatting. You can also do this on your off days. I would gradually try to work up to a higher height. That way you can work on loading your hip that much more. And you're gonna also work on your balance. You're gonna work on a little bit of 3-dimensional balance for your knee too, which will eventually wind up helping your squat a ton as well. So that will help you avoid any improper hip loading issues with your squat. And that's our fix number 1. So we've covered improper hip loading as one mechanism for knee pain in our squat, but there's another problem that can happen in our hips that can also lead to knee pain, and that is just a general lack of glute strength, especially glute strength in creating something called hip external rotation. As we lower into our squat, this is not just a 2-dimensional move where we're bending at the knee and bending at the hips. Instead, it's actually a 3-dimensional move, and as we lower, our knees should essentially be able to open up. When we do that, when our knees open up, they're gonna track that much more efficiently with our shins, and that can help us prevent knee pain, and that's gonna also help us drive up from the squat as well. In order for that to happen, we need strong glutes, because every time we lower, as we lower and as we're pressing up, it's our glutes that continue to drive our knees open as we're squatting. If there is no strength in our glutes, then we're not gonna be able to do that. So what we have to do if we really want to avoid knee pain, if we want to get out of knee pain, we've got to make sure that we're training our glutes, and we're training our glutes with 2 key moves that will really help us create and reinforce that idea of hip external rotation. One of those exercises is something called the clam. And this one may look silly, it may look like something that you don't really think you want to do in the gym, but at the same time, it is essentially building outer glute strength. You can do it with a resistance band or you can do it without one. Either way, you want to think about doing 2 to 3 sets of 20 reps. We can keep the reps high because our glutes are meant to be very, very strong, and they are an always-on muscle, so don't be afraid to get those reps up there. That's one move you can do. The other move we can do is a monster walk. So we're gonna wrap a resistance band around our knees. You can also put one around your ankles if you want. And all we're gonna do, we're going to get into essentially like a defensive stance like we're gonna be in basketball, and we're going to slowly walk back and forth laterally for say 5 to 10 steps each side. As we're walking, what you're aiming to do is stack your knee over your ankle on every single step, and the sooner you do that, the more aggressively you do that, the more you're gonna feel it in that outer hip. We're continuing to build that outer glute strength, which will wind up translating and helping your knee stay in good position when you're squatting. So if you add those 2 moves, 1 to your squat prep, you only need to do 1 to 2 sets on days when you're squatting, and 2 in on all your other days so that you're continuing to develop a ton of glute strength, it will really, really aid your knees in terms of staying out of pain. So continuing on down, we've covered our hip. Now we're gonna look at the knee joint. And one of the main issues that occurs at the knee joint that's gonna lead to knee pain when squatting could just be the simple fact that we don't spend enough time in deep knee flexion. Even if you're only squatting till your thighs are parallel to the ground, we still need that full range of motion at the knee, and we need to spend time there for 2 reasons. 1, because we want to build tendon strength in our knees, and 2, because spending time in deep knee flexion is going to train our quads in a lengthened position, and it's also going to ensure that we have proper mobility and flexibility in our quads so that they don't restrict us when we're squatting. If we can't get into deep knee flexion, if I can't get my knees beyond a 90-degree bend, then that's going to be a huge limiting factor in my squat. Remember, you need more range of motion in a joint than you're actually going to use on your strength exercises. If you're running out of that range of motion quickly, you're not going to efficiently squat. Even if you don't have knee pain, it's still a limiting factor. So what can we do to make sure that we spend enough time in deep knee flexion, and how do we enhance deep knee flexion? There are 2 exercises that you can do, and you can work these in as accessory motions on your leg days, or just do them 2-3 times a week, using them to just bulletproof your knees overall. The first exercise you can do is going to be a unilateral exercise. We're going to basically go to an ass to grass split squat. What we're trying to do here is not to really focus on the split squat idea, but all we're focusing on is driving our knee as far in front of our toes as possible. You can even let your heels come up as you're doing this. And in addition to that, what we're really trying to do is essentially get our hamstring to touch our calf on every single rep. That way we're getting a really, really good deep stretch through our quads, and we're working that really deep knee flexion. Think about doing 3 sets per side of 6 to 8 reps on this, focusing on taking your time and really getting that stretch. Once you've gotten into a position where your knees are at their max knee flexion, hold that for a good 2 to 3 seconds, really feel that stretch, really feel that in your quad, and then press up. We're using this as much for its stretching properties as we are using it for its strengthening properties. They're both gonna go hand in hand. The other idea that you can look at is gonna be a bilateral one. We're going to go to a heels off the ground assisted squat. And all we're trying to do here is that same idea, except now we're doing it bilaterally and we're loading the knee joint just a little bit differently, but we're again trying to get our hamstrings to touch our calves, and we're trying to hold that position, get that deep stretch, exist in that moment of deep knee flexion for 2 to 3 seconds, and then press up. Think about doing 2 to 3 sets of 5 reps of these, and you can do these every day. They're really just gonna help your knees feel that much more comfortable, and we're gonna keep enhancing that deep knee flexion. As you get comfortable in deep knee flexion, your tendons are gonna get stronger, your quads will be more resilient, and all of that will help you when you're squatting to avoid knee pain. And continuing on down, the last area that could be leading to our knee pain just might be our ankles. So here's the thing, when we squat, we actually need a lot more ankle mobility than you might think. In order for your knee to move forward when you squat, we need to have plenty of ankle mobility, because that's going to allow our shin to shift from perpendicular to the ground to that slightly forward angle that we need to appropriately squat. If we don't have flexibility through our Achilles tendons, then we're not going to be able to get that shift forward, and that's going to be a limiting factor in how we squat. Eventually, our knee joint is going to have to take on the brunt of that, and that could lead to knee pain. So what we have to do to address that is make sure that we are adequately training mobility through our ankle joint. And this can be done very simply with a drill that you can do anytime throughout the day, in addition to doing it with your squat prep. All we have to do with our squat prep is we're going to get down into a kneeling stance, half kneeling stance. Gonna make sure that I'm driving my heel into the ground, and I'm actually gonna try to lock down my heel with my foot and try to feel my Achilles tendon with my thumb. And from here, all I'm gonna do is think about pushing my knee out in front of my foot as far as possible, while making sure to never lose contact with my heel on the ground. If my heel is coming up off the ground, then I'm gonna lose that deep Achilles stretch. So I'm gonna drive my heel into the ground as I shift forward. You can put a little bit of pressure on the top of your knee as you're doing this too. The key thing, just make sure that heel is driven into the ground. As a piece of my squat prep, I'm gonna think about doing 1 to 2 sets of 3 to 5 reps, or you can even do this in between all of your sets of squats, because all we're doing, it's not gonna be very taxing, but we're still gonna get a chance to reinforce and continue to mobilize that Achilles tendon. That way we have the movement capability that we need. So those are 4 potential issues that could be leading to knee pain, and we've given you a solve for each of these too. The nice thing about all these exercises is they don't need to dominate your training, they're just pieces of your squat warm-up. Because if there's one thing about the squat, it's that you can generally find a way to get it done. You don't need to stop squatting. You just need to address the issues with these moves, and you'll still be building plenty of leg strength and still be adding numbers to your squat for a long time.